Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar, Connected Communities Harnessing the Power of Digital Public Infrastructure. This event is part of the ITU Digital Transformation Dialogue Series. My name is Vijay Mori, and I will be your Master of Ceremony and also moderator for today's event. In this webinar, we aim to delve into the concept and implementation of digital public infrastructure, its importance as a digital public good, and the areas where technical standards are required. We are thrilled to have a stellar panel lined up for today's discussion. Before we delve into the heart of the discussions, allow me to provide you with some information about how the session will be run. All questions from the audience will be taken during the Q&A session after the presentations by the panelists. Participants can submit their questions by typing in the Q&A window. You will see the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So also, please indicate the city and country you are connecting from as well. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the event website afterwards. And also all the presentations that will be made during the session today will be also available on the event website. So to kickstart this webinar, we have Mr. Seizo Onoe, Director of the Telecommunication Standardization Bureau of the ITU, who will deliver the opening remarks. Over to you, Onoe.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this latest webinar in our thriving series of digital transformation dialogues. Universal connectivity and sustainable digital transformation are ITU's top priorities. Our discussion today will go right to the heart of these priorities. Digital public infrastructure can create very meaningful improvement to people's quality of life. We see prime examples in digital finance, which we will look at closely during this webinar, where digital technologies are helping millions of people to save money and access loans for the very first time. The benefits of digital public infrastructure are well established, but realizing these benefits call for sustained infrastructure investment, alignment in the incentives of the public and private sector, and digital development strategies that encourage market entry, innovation, and cost efficiency. Technical standards are essential building blocks to achieve these objectives. ITU standards guide cost-effective evolutions towards more advanced technologies, while accounting for our investment in earlier technology generations. They foster reliability, openness, and interoperability, as well as economies of scale that brings down costs and prices for everyone. Standards are essential technical foundations for new industries to grow and established industries to keep moving forward. They create the confidence to continue investing in our digital future. Our digital development strategies are best positioned for success when we build on trusted international standards. ITU's standardization process ensures that all participants' voices heard. Our membership includes government, industry players, academia, and civil society. We offer a unique platform to build collaboration and consensus, and I very much encourage you to take advantage of it. Our discussions today will consider where standards can provide more support to digital public infrastructure in view of the experience and insights shared by our expert panelists. We highly appreciate your support and that of everyone joining us online today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Onoe-san, for setting the stage for our discussions today. Before we move to our panelists, allow me to provide a few introduction as well. We've seen over the past 14 years, the remarkable difference that digital services can make to people's lives through access to payments, finance, healthcare, education, and other services as well. Across the globe, millions of people, including small-scale farmers, small businesses, are now able to make and receive payments using their phones. During the COVID pandemic, countries from Togo to Singapore sent emergency digital payments directly to vulnerable households at unprecedented speed. Yet, benefits like these cannot be taken for granted. And this is, a bit what we're going to explore today, how we can ensure digital services are accessible to everyone and simplify the process through which they have access to them. By creating digital public infrastructure that is fair, interoperable, inclusive, and open, it enables essential public and private services to be accessed for the common good. These digital public infrastructure are built on an open and interoperable architecture. The most common components of digital public infrastructure include platform and systems for digital identification, digital payments, and digital and data sharing. And by applying DPI across economies and societies, and by using DPI to address and tackle sector-specific priorities and challenges, countries can accelerate their growth and development. So we'll see a bit during today's session, harnessing the power of digital public infrastructure with our esteemed panelists, Mr. Pramod Varma, Mr. Are Laponin, Mrs. Liv Martin Nordhoek, Mr. Daniel Goldscheider, and Sylvan Tran, how these digital public infrastructures can enhance, uh, economic development across countries as well. So we'll now dive into the session. We'll give each panelist 7 minutes for their introductory remarks at first, and we'll kick off the session with Mr. Pramod Varma, who is the former chief architect for the India stack and also the co-chair of the DPI Center for DPI. So over to you, Mr. Varma.
Thank you, Vijay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Wonderful to be here, and thank you for organizing this. This topic has been at the forefront of economic development. How does digital help formalize the society and create massive inclusion and also innovation in the local context? I just wanted to start with uh, maybe a definition of a DPI. It's sort of hard, but I would we have been as a practitioner, I would say there is subtleties between traditional digitization of the government. Sometimes that get conflated with digital public infrastructure. So the word infrastructure is very, very key aspect of that. It actually means uh, you build something that is minimal in nature, but allow third party ecosystem to innovate using that building block. So DPIs are normally not the full solution by itself. They are merely a building block or a component of the system. And if you build enough of those building blocks or components, the combinatorial power of these blocks become very, very evident to the ecosystem. So, two biggest difference in what is DPI and what's not a DPI is that DPIs ought to be reusable by third-party ecosystem, and they have to be defined using open standards and specifications. So if you build a component that is based on open standards and specifications and allow the third-party ecosystem to innovate on top of that, you are on a DPI journey. And um, there's another myth typically comes with DPI is that it's very limited to identity payment and data or credential sharing. And my personal view that it's not need not be. And if you build higher order digital public infrastructure, you might be building shared infrastructure for energy transition and something very functional, or agriculture or healthcare. But if you are building something that is infrastructure in nature, that is not a solution in nature, and if you allow third party to innovate on top of that, you have a DPI story. So I think this nuance is very, very key. And from India's experience, India started in our DPI journey in 2009 with our identity project. When Indians were the most poorly banked nation on earth, we were 1.3 billion people then, currently 1.4 estimated billion people. And given the diversity and scale of India, not having identity, no one having bank account was not acceptable as the economy was developing and booming. So India went through that transition, and in about 7 year span, India managed to create digital identity for all. Today, 1.4 billion people are connected to the digital identity system. There are authentication APIs, and then subsequently built a credential sharing architecture called DigiLocker, extensively used by about 250 million plus users, and then unified payment interface, the payment infrastructure in India that is launched in 2016, extremely minimalistic in nature, completely driven by private innovation on top. Today, last month, doing 13.5 billion transactions. So if you look at the combination of this, what really happened is the massive formalization and inclusion of the society. In 2009, less than 50 million people, or 2016, by the way, in India had less than 50 million people using digital payments. Today, 500 million people do digital payments. In 2009, almost no one had a digital identity in India. Today, 1.4 billion have digital identity. So you would see this massive formalization and inclusion effect in addition to a massive private innovation effort. So the balancing of innovation and inclusion, not private innovation at the cost of inclusion. It is actually ought to be both. You have to include and also create private innovation. And this is good thing is that it's not India only story, and we have seen this truly global. DPIs are being developed, in Europe, in Estonia, for example, or Brazil in PIGS story, or Thailand in Prompt Pay, Philippines identity, many. I'm not Togo's effort or Morocco's effort, Ethiopia, and everyone is in their own journey in creating digital infrastructure components that subsequently triggers a domino effect in the economic inclusion and progress of the society. So if you look at, in summary, it's really a story of digital public infrastructure, a story of open standards and specification driven minimum building block of public rails, on top of which private innovation is thriving. And if you can bring that in a massive, vibrant private innovation on top of it, you have a sustainable economic development that is incentive aligned and inclusive in nature. And also you tend to address things like monopoly issues or lack of digitization, lack of incentives, and so on. So it's a topic that ought to be discussed, quite similar to physical infrastructure that we talk about in the countries. Digital infrastructure in the digital realm in the next 10, 20 years, and all countries are going to go digital. And it is essential that a public rail, so public innovation rails are created to balance innovation, balance competition, and balance inclusion and economic development. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varma. We'll come back to those interesting points that you raised in your presentation or in your introductory remarks about, what is a DPI and the components and also the different characteristics. Now we are going to move to Mr. Are Laponin, who is a senior e-government consultant at govconsult.org in Estonia, to share maybe the Estonian experience on DPI. So Mr. Laponin, the floor is yours.
Ari, I think you are on mute.
Yes, Ari, we are not hearing you. Maybe you're muted.
Yes, sorry for that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm from Estonia, and we are pretty much digitized nation. And I have a few slides about what we have as an infrastructure in a country. So as infrastructure for a digital transformation, and this is what I refer as a digital public infrastructure. We have this picture of house, of nice house, which emphasize that when you are building digital public infrastructure, you have to consider even some sequences when you do that. Not only important is what is digital public infrastructure, but also how you do that. And in the beginning, there is a foundation, and foundation, it's a legal framework, governance model, new governance model, and policy. And this foundation is important because digital infrastructure is not just a kind of interesting digitalization initiative. It's a prerequisite for us to start live in a new environment, in digitized society, in digital economy. So, and for that, one part of the digital infrastructure is legal framework, governance, and policy, which is enabling digital transactions and digital relations. Yeah. So then there is a foundational pillars without which you cannot really talk about digital, and that is like 4 pillars. First pillar is access. You have to have people able to access digital world. You have to manage and regulate how you use digital data, always privacy, security policies, and who is owner of data in a bank, who is owner of data in public administration organizations. Then next pillar is interoperability, in order to really transform the way how we consume services. It's very often, and actually all the time, it is important to be able to use information from different sources. We have in public administration of Estonia, we have so-called once only policy, which forbid to one administration ask information which is already available in a public sector databases. But for that, you have to have this interoperability framework. And then last but not least, pillar, it's a digital identity. Because without digital identity, digital transaction most probably will not be possible, because at the end of the day, there is always behind the computer or behind smart device or any device, there is always person, and to have a legal transactions, you have to have identity of this person, and only after that you can start building organizational digital capabilities and go further to the public administration reform. So as from the public administration point of view, this is what if I'm kind of responsible for digital transformation in a public administration in Estonia, this is what I will get from the already from the digital public infrastructure. So I have people who have national ID, who are able to use smart ID from their mobile phones, who are fully trusting all digital trust services like authentication, authorization, digital signature. Once we have calculated that introduction of digital signature have allowed us to save something like 1.5% of our GDP. So it's quite a lot of money. Digital data is regulated in Estonia. We have since last century already data protection regulations, data protection agency, which is supervising how we are using data. We have population which is educated, literated, has an access to devices, and we have to enable that. We have spent quite a lot of resources on that. We were engaging public and private money in order to organize awareness tours across the country. We have established a law which is ensuring that in every village, in every remote area, there is a library with free of charge computers with internet access. So everybody across the country can actually really access digital services. And And there is also interoperability. We have interoperability framework. We call it X-Road, and there are like thousands of services available for reuse. And important to mention that this digital infrastructure is available to me regardless where I am, whether I am in a public sector or in private sector. So for me, it is important that when we talk about infrastructure, digital infrastructure, it actually should be public. That means that when I am like a private sector car driver, I can drive my car on a road because it's infrastructure. In the same way, in Estonia, we have, if you are public sector IT organization or a private sector IT organization, you can use the same infrastructure, the same national ID, the same digital signature, the same services and building blocks. And another important lesson what we learned here in Estonia is that we started digital transformation and building digital infrastructure, keeping in mind probably kind of cost savings on the public administration side, because digital transformation at that time, let's say in last century, it was for us initially like a matter of saving of cost, because when you automate things or when you introduce self-service, you can actually benefit and cut your cost, overhead cost. But quite soon we realized that this digital transformation should keep in mind not only government with its cost efficiency agenda, but also it should look to the economy in order to support the digital transformation of economy and introduce new jobs, new business models. At the same time, digital infrastructure should bring benefits and should support society as well, citizens, communities, interrelations between communities. So all this should be considered and should be part of the equilibrium, and only then digital public infrastructure will become actually public, when it's really brings benefits to everybody. So that is like briefly lessons learned from Estonian case, how we look to the digital public infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Are, for sharing the digital public infrastructure experience of Estonia. We saw already a bit of similarities in the components mentioned earlier by Mr. Pramod Verma. We'll be coming back to this during the questions and answer. Now I'd like to invite our next panelist, Mrs. Lieb Marte Nordhoek, who is the CEO of the Digital Public Goods Alliance Secretariat. So Mrs. Nordhoek, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And just confirming that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. So first of all, let me thank you for inviting me, and it's such an honor to be part of this distinguished group, and it's great to speak after Pramod and the representative of Estonia, because I do think that what I will mention will be very complementary, and I'll try to keep it relatively short so we have time for questions and answers and a good discussion afterwards. So we can move on to the next slide, please. You can just go directly to the next. Let's see here, I'm not able to see this screen, but I'm assuming that you have put up the next slide. Let's see here.
Yes, we can't see the slides as well.
Yeah.
Just hold on a few minutes.
Yeah. If not, I can show them myself if that's easier.
Okay, I think
Here we
it's
go.
coming up now.
Excellent, thank you. So what I'm showing you here, and just to set a little bit of context, because we have many terms here. We're talking about digital public infrastructure today, and now I'm going to introduce the concept of digital public goods. But I promise that I will tie it together, and it links a lot to what Dr. Pramod was saying around interoperability and building blocks, and also around what Ari was saying about making sure DPI is public. So what I'm showing you here on the screen is the UN Secretary General's definition of digital public goods, which came in his roadmap for digital cooperation in 2020. And that definition came out as a result of a high-level panel on digital cooperation that looked into how to advance digital cooperation, and in particular, how digital cooperation also could help advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the main recommendations that came out of this high-level panel was around the creation of an alliance and platform for digital public goods. And digital public goods, you can think of it as a subset of the open source landscape. So it doesn't only include software, but also data, content, open standards, open AI systems, and so on, that meet certain minimum safeguards, for instance, related to privacy by design and do no harm by design features, and are relevant for the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. And as a result, together with a definition, we also had the creation of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which I lead, and where there's today more than 40 members. It was co-founded by 4 members, but today we're over 40 members, including an increasing number of countries, including both India and Estonia, incidentally, as well as multilateral entities, including ITU, incidentally, and a number of philanthropic foundations and technology companies and think tanks. And this is a group of stakeholders that are advancing digital public goods for accelerating attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And today there are more than 160 digital public goods listed in the registry that we steward at the Digital Public Goods Alliance. But to come to how this meets up with digital public infrastructure, if you can please share the next slide. I would like to drill in on where the overlap is, because digital public goods covers a relatively broad spectrum of open source technologies of relevance for the Sustainable Development Goals. But there is this subset of digital public goods that are relevant for enabling countries to build out their digital public infrastructure capabilities. So that means digital public goods that can help countries build out verifiable digital identity systems, civil registration and vital statistics systems, real-time payment platforms, and secure data exchange. And this is where we're getting into this sweet spot, so to say, around how there is this potential and where we're seeing a lot of increasing momentum, which I would like to get around to during the questions and answers, around how more and more countries are now looking to open source alternatives and digital public goods when they're building their digital public infrastructure. So if you go to the next slide, and last, I have just listed some examples that we're seeing now of digital public goods that can enable countries to build their DPI capabilities. And on this list, and this is not a comprehensive and full list, but these are some examples that where there is demonstrated relevance for building DPI capabilities. So the first example you will see here on the list is MOSIP, the Modular Open Source Identity Platform, which is really, in a way, an open source version of Aadhaar. So it's been designed based on a lot of learnings from the Indian digital identity system, Aadhaar. And Pramod can speak a lot better to that than I can, of the affordances of Aadhaar, but this is an open source alternative. And there's a number of countries that are in various stages of exploring, piloting, or full-scale implementing MOSIP. We also have examples here that cover civil registration, payments, and also you will see on this list Estonia's X-Road, which I also think is a really, really good example of how a country a digital public good has originated in a country and is now being stewarded by multiple countries. So Estonia together with Finland and Iceland, and growing community there, but making this available open source, resulting in Xroad being implemented widely across the globe. And for instance, with significant growth in South America and on the African continent. So I would actually like to stop here and just to show that these are examples of how there are open source alternatives that can enable countries to build these digital public infrastructure capabilities that Dr. Varman, also Are from Estonia alluded to, and where there is a lot of potential now for both for new types of digital cooperation, which I would love to come back to during the questions and answers, and also for countries to build these systems faster, better, and also potentially at lower cost long term. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Liv, for this introduction and also putting on the link between digital public goods and capability for digital public infrastructure. We'll now move to the next speaker, Mr. Daniel Goldscheider, who is the Executive Director of the Open Wallet Foundation. So Mr. Goldscheider, the floor is yours for your introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Thank you very much for the invitation. As the name suggests, Open Wallet is focused on one particular kind of digital public infrastructure, and those are digital wallets. Now, many of you might have already a preconceived notion of what a digital wallet is. Maybe you have used a wallet like the Google Wallet or the Apple Wallet or the Samsung Wallet to pay for something. Maybe you are living in a country where you are actually able to show your driver's license in completely digital form. But those are just early precursors of what we are going to be able to do in the future. We believe that digital wallets are going to be at the center, not just to prove who you are or to affect the payment, but also to show academic credentials, proof that you finished university, for instance, or healthcare credentials, get access to your car, get access to a hotel room, or maybe your own home. Digital wallets are going to be the home for NFTs and CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. In aggregation, we believe that wallets are going to be hugely important. One, for the use cases that they directly serve, but two, also because they are foundational for many other use cases, including, of course, other digital public infrastructure projects that your wallet is going to support. So the first thesis really is that digital wallets are incredibly important, and therefore it's really critical to get them right. The second thesis of Open Wallet is that digital wallets should be built a little like web browsers. And what we mean by that is when you think about the browser you use today, really any browser, it's obviously based on open standards. Take HTTP or HTML away from the internet and there is literally nothing left. But browsers are not just based on open standards. They're also based on open source software. And you could ask why. If all 235 people in this webinar would be interested to build a web browser, why not just base it on open standards? Why work together on open source software? And I think there are a couple of very good arguments why open source software makes sense. One is simply money. If we work together and we create the fundamental guts for web browsers together, we will save money. Now, some of you might have a big budget and not care that much about money, but you will also save time. And in addition to that, open source software with a large, active developer community can create the safest software in the world. Because maybe I don't see a vulnerability, but you do. And then you will alert me, and we can address that vulnerability together, ideally before it's being exploited. And if it is exploited, and any one of you finds a solution and a fix, I get to use it. And if I create a fix, you get to use it. So open source software can be very good for security, and it can be very good for interoperability, because a web browser is based on hundreds of standards. I had a conversation recently with someone in the Google Chrome team, and they believe that a modern web browser actually is based on more than 700 discrete standards. So even if everything you do is built and based on standards, as you combine these standards in a complex product, you might reintroduce friction. Now, the basic idea is that wallets will benefit from all the same reasons to use open source software for digital wallets. And in the wallet space, we believe there is an important fifth reason to use open source software, which is certification. Imagine you are the Department of Homeland Security in the United States and you want to issue a green card in as many wallets as possible. The question is, how can you trust the wallet? Well, if we work together and some of the fundamental code that we all use is the same, and DHS is trusting that code, it becomes a lot easier to certify a wallet that is based on this code. So thesis number 2 is open source software is very useful for digital wallets. And thesis number 3 is ideally we should do this in a multi-stakeholder partnership. You know, when we think about infrastructure in the physical world, we think of something like roads, for instance, or bridges maybe, or tunnels. And typically, in many countries, this is just done by the government and only the government. In the digital world, we have a lot of actors. We have companies that are producing the chips in your phone, and we have companies that produce the operating systems. And in our opinion, in a perfect scenario, wallets are not just going to be dictated by governments, but they should also not just be dictated by a few large technology companies. It should really be a partnership. It should be something that brings together representatives from countries, as well as companies and standard development organizations and civil society, in order to ensure that we get digital wallets right, so that they are secure, that they are interoperable, and that they're working at the end of the day for everyone on this call, for us as holders of these wallets, rather than just for a select few. So thank you very much. I'm staying brief here as well, because I like Liv's suggestion that we should leave room for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your introductory remarks. So, and also for highlighting the role of digital wallets in the digital public infrastructure. So our next speaker now is Mr. Sylvain Tran, who is a senior security architect at LSHD, and he's also an editor in ITUT study group 17 for question 10 on identity management. So Mr. Tran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I'm very glad to be here, and if you'll give me a moment, I will share my screen, begin. Let's see. Can you guys see what I'm sharing?
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank
Wonderful. So, just a quick bit about myself. Why am I here? Mostly because I work in the industry. I'm in information security. I work for a few large companies, but more importantly, I work for the ITU. I'm an editor within Question 10, and Question 10 may sound kind of obscure, but we work in identity management and we set open standards for open standards and recommendations from the ITU from question 10. So it's up to the member states to decide whether they adhere to the recommendations, but a large group of people with lots of expertise help to set those standards. So that's enough about me. Other things that I'm working on, XDOT 1250 is actually pretty directly relatable to this conversation. It's baseline capabilities for enhanced identity management interoperability. We are in the process of putting together open standards that will help global interoperability for identity. And we think that's pretty important considering everybody's moving towards a digital society. So why identity? Identity is pretty much the cornerstone and gateway to all services on the internet. If we're going to do something digital, we need to know who you are. Once we know who you are, we need proof of that person so we can prove that it's who you say you are. Once we get through that, then it comes typically to authentication. Authentication is basically, do we know that it's you? Once we pass all those gates, then the next gate is basically authorization. What you're allowed to do in whatever system that you're trying to access. And ultimately, you get to the service or resource that you were originally trying to target. So federation of identity. Up until this point, most organizations basically keep an island of identity information to themselves. So imagine like online places that you visit, they all keep separate sets of identity of you within their own independent systems. But federation of identity is starting to pique the idea that maybe we can share identity from multiple sources and combine these identity data into more usable forms that can be used in many, many different places. So in short, XDOT 1250, which is about the global use of identity, and DPI share a lot of things in common and are very complementary to each other. The idea of interoperability, of federation, of open networks and open standards. And they're all designed for international use. So the general idea behind XDOT 1250 and what I've been working on is one set of credentials for everything. That's pretty much all I wanted to present today. My contact information, and I'll keep my speech short. VJ, I think I went too fast, but I'll turn it over so there's more time for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvan, for your introduction. I'd like to, before we go to the questions, I'd like to invite maybe the panelists to also have a look at the Q&A window. There's quite a few questions already there, and and feel free to respond directly on the Q&A window to any of the questions. Like I said, we'll be coming back to the presentations that were made, around especially, the country experiences of India and Estonia for the digital public infrastructure. One thing that was mentioned by Mr. Pramod Verma in his presentation, he mentioned two things, two main characteristics for digital public infrastructure. One is open standards and also reusability. Yeah? So maybe Mr. Pramod Verma, maybe as a first question, maybe based on your experience of India's digital public infrastructure, maybe in addition to these two principles. What were the other key principles and maybe approaches that were important for India to achieve such a massive scale as far as the implementation of their digital public infrastructure is concerned?
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Excellent set of sessions so far, discussions so far. Very, very, very complementary. There's so much commonality in among what the people have spoke about. And just to recall, interoperability and reuse are the essence of DPI. Interoperability comes from specifications, open interfaces, and open standards. Now, standards is a slightly heavy duty word. A lot of us face this issue. Who standardizes, right? So the question we always ask is first is to define open specification and preferably open source in the kernel itself of the DPI so that public scrutiny can happen. But really, it's about interoperability through open standards and open specs. And then comes third party reuse. So if you don't have third party reuse, you don't achieve scale. And that's a really important learning that we went through. So if you really look at India's few characteristics, there are many things that allow scale, but one is minimalism. And it's very unintuitive for people who are especially builders of solutions, builders of systems, wanting to build more and not wanting to build less. So DPI's the success of DPI for India was to build really less. So each component, if you look at identity had 4 attributes literally and 2 optional attributes, very very little, and 2 APIs, public API. That's it. But we did that for 1.4 billion people, and it's used 80 million times every day. So it's just you achieve scale through minimalism. That's very very important understanding. Minimalism also helps cost. There was a question in the chat or somewhere. People ask, "Oh, how can developing nations afford DPI cost?" And the funny thing about DPI is that you are not building everything at all. You're building very little. So when you build very little, it becomes lower in cost and easier to sustain within the government, and you are spreading the cost through the ecosystem, because ecosystem is now building on top of that. You're not building the whole house, you're only building the foundation, right? So minimalism is very key. Second, it has to be context invariant. So DPIs, when you build as context free or context invariant as possible, because characteristics of DPI is reuse. And if you have to reuse, you can't be, DPI itself cannot be highly contextual and opinionated. Then it can't be reused. So reuse comes from generalization or context free nature of DPI. Identities and identities and identity. You can use it in healthcare use cases, agriculture use cases, education use cases, benefit transfer use cases. You can't put all that thing into the DPI. DPI should be stripped out of the context so that it becomes a lot more reusable widely that it can. That's second characteristics of DPI that needs to design. Third, ecosystem incentive alignment. It's very, very key to align the incentives of both private and public ecosystem. You cannot do what they are supposed to do. You have to enable them to do their job better, faster, cheaper. So identity as electronic KYC helped a fintech company to onboard millions of customers faster, cheaper onto the system. That means they now find value in making sure your DPI is actually successful, because they have a financial incentive or economic incentive or a business incentive to actually keep the DPI alive. So incentive alignment to the ecosystem is very, very key. And very importantly, identifying a use case that can unlock value for citizens. That what's called a killer use case. When you launch a DPI, you have to identify what is the killer. Sometimes you end up taking most complex use case or most advanced use case and actually end up failing. Sometimes you take simpler, easier for the society to adopt kind of use case, but at scale, it can unlock value. And the best part about unlocking value for for citizen is that even the politicians don't want to undo it later, because it's so much value is unlocked in the society that India has transferred from completely opposing political regimes with no change to our DPI other than boosting, because hey, if it helps 1 billion people, nobody wants to pull the plug. So it's really, really important that you what you call identify those early use cases that are unlocking the value. But there are many more, but I don't want to bore people. I want to enough questions and Q&A and other people. So thank you, Vijay.
Okay, thank you very much, Pramod. I'd like to also ask the other panelists maybe to also enable your camera, because now we are in the Q&A window, so we can all take part in this, make it quite interactive. And now my next question is maybe for Are. So we've heard about the example of India, the principles, around the success for scaling the Indian DPI. Maybe Ari, from Estonia's perspective, how was this? How does the process of producing the DPI influence the end result? Is it similar to? Is it a similar experience as India's case? What's your thought on that?
Well, I think, yeah, this is important thing, and Dr. previously mentioned killer application. I think this is one of the key words here. You have to pick up killer application. Of course, killer application is different from country to country, but if you pick it up, right, killer application, then you will win trust and interest of society, of people, and that will create kind of directionality to your infrastructure. And this is something what make digital make public. I mean, when you pick up right thing. I mean, in Estonia, it's a cold around here. I mean, and so probably for us it was important not to go to the office. Sometimes, it's not an issue or it's not a priority. So when I visiting some African countries, they have priority in agriculture or in some other places. So you have to pick up right area. This is one thing. Another thing, which is related also to the process. I mean, digital infrastructure should be demystified because there are many concerns, especially now, many concerns about privacy, security, and so on, so on. Also, it looks to be a complex, and this is where we used something what you can conclude as transparency and accountability. I mean, we had kind of a discussion about lessons learned in a different projects, and we had a continuous discussion between private and public sector, what it is security, how it's shown. Because, for example, we have digital elections over internet since 2005, and of course some politicians would utilize it to claim that okay, digital votes are not eligible. So we have spent a lot of efforts to become transparent how digital infrastructure works, how it is built, and so on and so on. And also with collective learning and experience sharing, this is another attributes which I think was very important for us, because with building digital infrastructure was driven mainly from the public administration, but sharing learning and experience allowed us to ensure that there is usage of the digital infrastructure, not only by public sector delivering state services, but also by private sector modernizing economy and society. So in that sense, attributes of how you build digital infrastructure is also important in order to make sure that it's actually public.
Okay, thank you very much, Ari, for your perspective from the Estonian experience. I think now maybe one aspect maybe to look at is the role of the private sector maybe in digital public infrastructure. Okay, I think you touch about it a bit, Ari, but maybe, I don't know, Daniel, would you like to maybe also share your experience here, maybe about the role of private sector in digital public infrastructure, maybe based on the on the experience of the digital wallets sphere on your side?
Very happy to. I think, the term digital public infrastructure as such, in some cases already evokes a conflict between the public sector and the private sector. Is my wallet public? Is that something that belongs to the government? Is it something that belongs to the company that created the operating system of my phone? Or maybe it's actually something that belongs to me. So the way I look at it is that public infrastructure fundamentally does the bidding of the public. It serves the public. The biggest good, the highest good is to serve all of us, not just one company, not just one entity, but everyone involved. But that does not mean that the entities working on public infrastructure should just be the public sector, that it should just be a ministry or just be an institution that is part of the government. I think there is a huge opportunity for the public sector and the private sector to work together. And Pramod mentioned that, in terms of creating a minimum viable product and really letting the private sector innovate on top of it. I think in an ideal world, even that minimum viable product sometimes can benefit from knowledge and perspective of the private sector. And conversely, in some cases, branches of the government will have ideas to build their own services on top of public infrastructure. So we believe that an outcome where governments are trying to work against private sector companies and where you create this conflict where you say that private sector companies will only and always work against the public interest, I think is too narrow. And conversely, I think there is an opportunity to really ask public sector companies to help enable services that benefit all of us. We are seeing that in some cases with telecommunication companies, right? They are providing a service that really benefits all of society. And there are some rules that come attached with that. And I think in a world that is more and more digital, we come to rely not just on the public sector, but also on services that are provided by private sector entities that really are very much like the roads in a digital world. And that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do with the multi-stakeholder initiative at Open Wallet. And I think there might be other areas outside of wallets that will also benefit from a good partnership. But like in every good partnership, the core of a partnership is for each side to be very clear and transparent why you are entering a partnership. What is it that you want and what is it that you are interested to give? And I think if we can be clear about the goals that the public sector has with initiatives, for instance, like the European Digital Identity Wallet, and private companies join that discussion and they're equally clear, if we find a common denominator, I think both sides can benefit by this cooperation. And in the end, all of us as ultimately holders of the wallets or users of the payment service are going to benefit.
Thank you, Daniel. Maybe now moving on to Liv. So Liv, on the topic of digital public goods, maybe if you could shed some light, maybe the question on, taking the question from that I asked Daniel, maybe, but extending it a bit further. What kind of maybe digital cooperation approaches may be needed to ensure that all countries can build, safe, inclusive, and interoperable, maybe digital public infrastructure? and also, why you think maybe countries would be increasingly looking to digital public goods when building their digital public infrastructure.
Thank you for those questions, and I'm fervently also trying to answer some of the Q&A questions at the same time, so that's why I'm looking a little bit distracted here. No, so I think maybe I'll start with the first bit, the last question, and like why open source? And I actually think Daniel came with some very good arguments for what his hypothesis and the sort of thesis behind why open source. And I think that's very much some of the drivers that we're seeing. So one of them I would say is sovereignty, and that many countries have experienced many forms of vendor lock-ins that have really impeded their own digital sovereignty and their opportunity to strategically evolve their digital transformation journeys, meaning, being locked out of access to their own data, having interoperability challenges between different components and so on. So I think this sovereignty aspect of being able to leverage technologies that have been proven elsewhere, but that they can still freely adopt and adapt to meet contextual needs is one important driver of why. Another one I would say is, and I think Are alluded to the same, so this opportunity, the transparency aspect and the opportunity to look under the hood as to how technologies have actually been built. And as an extension of that, the opportunity also, and here I'm maybe particularly taking into account, emerging economies and so some of them, also even the low-income countries that are really, really making strides now on building digital public infrastructure. This opportunity to also give a chance to the local vendor ecosystem to build capacity and to find commercial opportunities around the open software. And I think there are some excellent examples to look to. For instance, how Estonia, to go back to Estonia, managed to build a very vibrant commercial ecosystem, even though X-Road is made available as a global or as a digital public good. So that is one. And then I think, and I can end by that, maybe it does open up for new types of digital cooperation. One country can make a local adaptation or innovation, solving a particular challenge, and can share that back with the community of other countries. So there is this potential for countries to build on the innovations of other countries that I see is resonating a lot. And I would like to stress that countries are sharing technologies regardless of income levels. We're seeing a digital public good like OpenG2P, which has its origin in Sierra Leone during Ebola, which has now, for instance, been reused in the Philippines, and so on. So I do think this idea that everyone can be creators, that this is not something that is, from high income to low income countries. It's not traditional development assistance thinking that is shaping this landscape. There's really a lot of sharing in all directions. And lastly, also, the opportunity to collaborate, but also to share learnings and best practices much more easily when there are open technologies involved, because you don't have to negotiate, contractual rights to be able to share information and so on. So that with that transparency and access to information, that can also enable collaboration. So I think those are some of the main drivers, and also long-term potential cost savings of being able to maintain and evolve your own technologies, even though it's not necessarily cheaper in the short run to deploy an open source technology, because you need to think differently about building capacity. But to answer your first question last, on digital cooperation approaches, so there are many ongoing, and I think, for instance, India set an exemplary were a great example by advancing digital public infrastructure to the forefront of the G20 agenda during its presidency last year. And I'm very, very happy to see that Brazil is continuing this now. So of course, these global kind of platforms are in itself driving cooperation. On the more operational side, there is something called 15.5, which is an implementation campaign very much focused on how countries can share learnings and best practices, and sometimes also technologies to help advance safe, inclusive, and interoperable digital public infrastructure, where the metric is kind of in the name. 50 countries having built out at least one component of their digital public infrastructure in 5 years. And this initiative was launched in November last year, and there's already 14 countries that have joined. And we're seeing a lot of momentum around the sharing of learnings and best practices. So I think there is that is a great example, I would say, of a digital cooperation approach that can really advance this agenda. And where CDPI, for instance, is already very involved. So Pramod's institution that was mentioned, and also Estonia is one of the first mover countries in this 15.5 initiative, alongside several other countries that I've seen in the Q&A, like Bangladesh, for instance. And I also think I saw Ethiopia there as well. So this is a great initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liv. And now maybe to Sylvan. So Sylvan, we've heard about the importance of open standards for in the case of the Indian stack, and also in the case of Estonia. Maybe from your side, how do you see the importance of open standards, and how will it help in promoting DPI adoption? And also maybe you can also mention a bit about the work happening in study group 17 as well in this particular area.
Sure, Vijay. I just wanted to give a small history lesson before I try to tackle these questions. One of the reasons that I enjoy working for the ITU is because if you're not aware of the ITU's history, they were the organization that set the open standards that allowed telecommunications to happen globally. Meaning I can pick up a phone anywhere in the world and call another person in another country, and it just happens. That's an example of infrastructure that was built on open standards. And the ITU is really good at doing these open standards. They've been doing it for a very long time. And that's why I'm very proud to be a part of the question 10. We set up open standards that are designed specifically for global use, global consumption. And we're very transparent about what we do. So these standards are put together by very smart people. They're submitted by very smart people all over the world. We go over them, we debate them, and ultimately we publish something that's a recommendation. The recommendation is then decided on by governments or organizations, countries, to decide if they want to adopt those. But basically, what I wanted to speak on was transparency. Open standards basically means that you know what these standards are. They're published for everybody to consume. They're published for everybody to see. You know what those standards are. And if everybody adopts the same standards, then we have this very interesting tipping point where more interesting things happen. So when it comes to identity, today, identity is basically little islands of information all over in different systems, different organizations, different groups. It means that they may have the same information about me, but maybe missing pieces here and there. And it's not synchronized. It's not a single use thing. It's spread across different organizations. So if identity were somehow to be tied together into a national or a global identity where everybody has the same identity that can be referenced, then we start to be able to do very interesting things. Like in my example of telecommunications, right? Voice calls, when voice calls were able to happen around the globe, we never knew what was going to come out of that. We just knew that we could make voice calls around the world. But from that, because information spread, that allowed the transformation of all kinds of industries, all kinds of things, businesses, organizations that would have never existed without that ability. And that's what I think DPI is really incredible. DPI is basically going to encompass the ability to do these very simple things like making a phone call, but in a digital sense. I'm using a very old example, but in a digital sense, we're going to be making abilities to connect, to do new things, and the digital infrastructure is going to provide that ability. It's going to transform a lot of things we cannot anticipate today. And as long as those services are provided in a very transparent way and designed in a very transparent way, and the standards are readily available for other groups, organizations to adopt, then we're going to be able to come to this very incredible tipping point where maybe I don't have to have a single password. Maybe I can have a single credential, a password, or something that allows me to access everything. And maybe I can have an identity that can be used around the world, that isn't questioned, that just happens, whether I'm in one country or another country, whether I seek services from this place or that place, whether it's for government activities or for commercial activities. That same identity could be used for my purchases, for getting loans, could be everything. So I see a lot of incredible things that can be accomplished by putting together very discrete services like, you know, a government verified identity or a internationally verified identity. Meaning a lot of these organizations, groups have rules and regulations they have to follow, meaning financial institutions, they have know your customer laws. They have to spend enormous amounts of money and effort trying to prove that this person that has an account exists. What if a government or some other entity, or, you know, there's many mechanisms that can make this happen, but what if that identity was global? What if that identity was accepted worldwide? That would then allow those organizations not to spend their money and resources and efforts on verifying this identity, but could just consume the identity as is, and it's verified and it's backed by other organizations that have the power to say, yes, this is that person.
Vijay, if I may add to what Silvan just said, I think it's a really good point. And you know, when you look at web browsers, I think there is a lot to like there, right? If you access a French website using an American browser from I don't know, you know, South Africa, they will simply display the web page. They're not going to say, oh, it's a French website, please download the French web browser. And the manufacturer of the browser is going to display the web page, even if it's a competitor. And the publisher of the browser is not going to ask the service for money, because the browser very much acts as infrastructure. I think in almost all cases, browsers are infrastructure. And I think this image of interoperability and of acting truly as infrastructure for the benefit of the user, that's a really beautiful vision. And conversely, there is a real danger if we don't get it right, that we will actually take a step backwards, because your driver's license today, you can put it in any wallet. There is no incompatibility. Most driver's licenses have the same size, and you can show your driver's licenses almost everywhere in the world. And if we don't do this well, we could really take a step backwards. And I think that would be a shame for us, and even more so for our children.
Okay, thank you for this contribution. I don't know if other speakers want to add anything, but we are also running a bit out of time on our side, and I see there's a lot of enthusiasm from the attendees. I see a lot of questions on the Q&A. I don't think we'll have time to look at all the questions, but I'll strongly encourage maybe the panelists to respond as far as possible to those questions that are still unanswered. But I think for the sake of time, we'll maybe take one or two questions from the list. I'm looking at the list at the moment. Maybe one question that we could consider is maybe the question on maybe the role. What role do civil society organizations and community-based initiatives maybe play in promoting the adoption of digital public infrastructure? And maybe here we can hear maybe from Dr. Varma and maybe also Ari, what's been the experience in their country, and then any other panelists that want to add on that would be also welcome to do so. So yes,
Yeah,
Dr. Varma.
thank you.
Yeah.
I was busy answering a bunch of questions there. A lovely set of questions, by the way, and so much to answer. I know we are running out of time, but a couple of things very quickly. And when I looked at the question, one was on the AI. AI is a topic that you can't get out these days. So what is DPI and AI? And we talk about that all the time. It is DPI AI enhances the ability for deploy and innovate on top of DPI. So if you have healthcare DPI or agriculture DPI, you could actually now apply AI techniques on top of that to dramatically increase the value of that DPI through solutioning and so on. So AI can be applied on top of DPI to dramatically improve. On the other hand, you can also apply DPI thinking to AI to ask the question, is AI being monopolized? Is AI being run by only one company in the world? So what DPI approach can we create to create open data set, open compute environment, open source models that allow a lot more democratization of AI? So it's a DPI to the power of AI. It's actually mutual. Okay, so remember that question. That's the other question, Vijay, you were asking is about how can civil society participate. Civil society's role is so critical in DPI is because DPI is not a silo solution approach. DPI is a foundational building block approach that is used by governments for other departments, for example, to solve their problems, private innovators and entrepreneurs who will build market-ready solutions using the DPI, and civil society who could also build now solutions faster, cheaper for addressing those sections of the society that typically market doesn't reach. And so the only leftover is for government to solve. So civil society can step up now to say, oh, now I can build a financial inclusion for a women self-help group in a village. I can build a lending application without me having to solve identity problem, KYC problem, data sharing problem, money transfer problem. These are building blocks are available. Can I compose a solution faster, cheaper for otherwise nobody would have built a local language app for these women for their own problems. So civil society can actually bring in significant solution effort. That's point number one. Point number two, on the other hand, civil society is also our eyes to the transparency and what can go wrong in the system. So civil society should be encouraged to watch out for those exceptions, because at scale, things do go wrong. Nothing you can do. Somebody will not get food. Some women will be isolated, excluded. Some children will not go to school. So it's important that civil society watches out constantly for those aberrations or exceptions and speak up and help improve the system constantly by being the eyes of the society in one sense. So they can solve from a solutioning, and they can observe and do a public scrutiny side of the system. They can do both, and it's brilliant to include them all the time.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe Ari or other panelists who want to add anything?
Well, I just from Estonian experience, I also just second that civil society participation is a crucial in order to establish trust towards this infrastructure. Like in Estonia, during last parliamentary elections, 63% of population voted electronically through internet without going to any place. So this kind of high percentage of people who are trusting e-voting cannot happen without actually trust of society toward digital infrastructure. And in that sense, I mean, we were cooperating public-private since the beginning, since 90s. And I think it was like a crucial for us to become like a digital society, and digital society and society participation in building infrastructure is like a key.
Thank you very much, Ari. We've covered in this session, I hope we've been able to provide you with answers to what is the digital public infrastructure, what are its main components, and also some country experiences in terms of the implementation of the digital public infrastructure, and maybe some killer applications that could help in scaling up the DPI at a country level, of course. We also covered a bit the role of digital public goods and how it can help implement digital public infrastructure capabilities, and also the role of open standards in enhancing promotion of digital public infrastructure implementation. So I'd like to thank our panelists for their invaluable insights, and to everyone who participated in today's session. I would now like to invite Dr. Bilal Jamousi, Deputy Director of the Telecommunication Standardization Bureau at the ITU for his closing remarks.
Thank you, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As we conclude our webinar, Connected Communities, Harnessing the Power of Digital Public Infrastructure, I would like to extend my appreciation to our speakers and moderator. Our experts have today emphasized that digital public infrastructure is not just a concept, but an operational reality that can empower communities and transform countries. DPI, as we have learned, is a digital network that enables the public and private sector to deliver economic opportunities and social services safely and efficiently to all residents. We have seen that DPI shares some core principles of trust, safety, interoperability, inclusion, and accessibility. It serves as a cornerstone in a country's digital transformation journey. Today, we have also gained valuable insights into India's journey in developing world-class DPIs, commonly known as India Stack. This journey, with its focus on identification, payment systems, and trusted data exchange, offers critical lessons for other nations embarking on their digital transformation. This webinar has served as an influential platform, enabling the sharing of experiences on the concept and implementation of DPI. We have explored the importance of digital public goods for DPI and discussed areas where technical standards are needed. These discussions will inform our work and our collaborations moving forward. In conclusion, I express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to join us today. Your active participation and the lively discussions have been instrumental in making this webinar a success. This has been even more important since DPI is one of the topics which will be discussed at the upcoming Global Standards Symposium in India this October. Let us continue to harness the power of digital public infrastructure to build connected, inclusive, and resilient communities. Today's webinar is part of the ITU Digital Transformation Dialogue series. To learn more and register for future webinars, I encourage you to visit our website. Thank you, and I look forward to our continued collaboration in this exciting field.
As we conclude this event, I would now invite you to join us for our upcoming session in the Digital Transformation Dialogue series, our Ask the Expert session on assessing the circularity of ICT goods, which will take place on 22nd of May. The details for the next event will be provided in the chat by my ITU colleagues. Once again, I'd like to thank all the panelists for their participation, and also to thank all our attendees for participating today. And I hope everyone, you found this session insightful, and wish you all a fantastic day ahead. Thank you very much.